a church in rural East Knox County named New Life, and we were averaging around 40 to 50 people in worship. I guess about 50 people in worship. And so there was a local school where we had been serving, just, volunteering. What do you need? Let us come in and help you. But I felt like we were supposed to do something more. So as a church, we began praying, and we did a prayer walk at the elementary school and around in our community, like, Lord, how can we be more connected to our community? And so in that process, I talked to the principal, and she said, well, we already have a church meeting down here. So since we have a one church, we only, really partner with one church at a time. So I told my congregation, we need to start praying that church, they call New Beginnings, that they get a promotion to another location. And so we prayed for about a year, and guess what? The principal called me and she said, New Beginnings is moving out. They had bought a building, a church, over in another community, which was like even better, right? They were leaving the community. So I immediately went and met with her, and I said, what do you need? And she said this: feed my children. And then she began to tell me about the poverty, which I was very well aware of in our community. Every place has poverty. Just because we may not be living in that part of the town, somebody else is. So she said, feed my children. And so we began to pray, how can we feed the children? And so we began to think about, well, we can go into the school and do a meal, and we worked it out where we were going to do it on Tuesdays. So I was in a district meeting with other clergy, and our DS said something about fresh expressions. Now that was a new word back in 2017. And so we I Googled it, and was like, what's a fresh expression? Because it's kind of confusing. Like, you're hearing that word now. Well, in 2017, I'd only heard that word once, and that was from our DS. So I'm Googling fresh expressions. That's a real thing. So she talked about dinner church, and I was like, that's what we want to do. We want to do dinner church at the elementary school. So we went through the hoops at the school. You got to get permission to come in. We did not use the kitchen area because they sanitized that. But we were allowed to go into their dining hall, the dining area. And so we worked on it, and we were able to get a grant of about $3,000 from the Holston Conference. I think it was Change for Children. So we wrote a grant and got that grant. So we were like, okay, now we can just fail forward, right? If it's not successful, we're still moving forward in our community. So we set it all up and began Holy Week in March of 2018. We started going down to the elementary school, and at first nobody showed. It was just us. And we had brought in our own food, so we were crock potting it. And we had the crock pot crew, and we would make the food, and we would take it down from the church down to the elementary school. No one came. We continued to be faithful. We were creating space for this new ministry, and we would pray over every seat. We would have a nice meal, and we would take home seconds, and anybody that came through the school, we were, hey, here's a to-go box, have some food. This went on for about, the end of March and April and May, and so the first week of June, we had Camp in the Community. And at Camp in the Community, I asked the camp staff, I said, would you be willing to come down to the school on that Tuesday night and let us invite all the campers and their parents and the whole family, and we'll have dinner church that night, and would you lead us in worship? And they said, sure. So we got everybody invited, and we were like, I don't know if anybody's going to show up. And it was amazing. The room was full of people who brought their families. We had 40 campers, I think, at that time, and then everybody bringing their family. It was wonderful. And so what happened there was we saw the fruit of the vision that we had a year before of what dinner church could look like for us. that was really the beginning for us, because those campers stayed and their families stayed, and then they brought friends and so forth and so on. And it really created a whole new church for us, a whole new campus. And we called Dinner Church, we called East Knox Elementary School our second campus. And every Tuesday night. And what we did was we would rotate who made dinner. So we had a 3-month schedule set up of every Tuesday. So then we started having nicknames for people. Okay, there was Lasagna Lady. So every time we saw her on the list, we knew lasagna was coming that night. There was Spaghetti Bill. And so Spaghetti Bill made the spaghetti and he brought it. Now other people did other things. We had Dessert Lady, and she called and said, I'm only going to do desserts. You don't have to worry about it. Every Tuesday night you will have an array of desserts. So that we kind of divided up the workload so that it wasn't just falling on a core group of people. People kind of rotated, and then we had plenty of people to come in and volunteer to set up, to serve, and to be a part of dinner church. We even had a lady in her 90s, and she said, I can't do this. She'd come to one dinner church and sat on the little, tables are a little low. And so, we are talking about elementary school, but it was fun. And she was like, I can't do that without a bag. And she said, can I be pizza lady? I'll write you a check when it's my turn. And then somebody orders the pizza and it's pizza night. Well, you know what was the most well-responded night? Yes, was Miss Audrey being pizza lady. And so she didn't show up anymore because it was hard on her body. But she wrote that check when she saw her name on that 3-month rotation. And we ordered pizza and we let the kids know, well, next week, pizza lady is going to be providing food. And it was just delightful. The kids would say, who's going to do, what's happening next week with the meal and all that kind of stuff. So the children got really involved in it. So we had a core group. It was a volunteer kind of setup, rotation. They could make it at home and bring their part, or they could make it there at the church. And we all met at a certain time, and then we caravanned or made our way down to the church, come in and set everything up, and then the families would come in, and they lingered for just a little bit for fellowship until it was time to start. Ours started at 6 o'clock, so at 6 o'clock, I would welcome everybody and invite them to circle up, and we would all hold it just like we just did, right? Because we want to start building community, right? And there's something about touch. There's something about being in a circle. There's something about, and we would go around and like introduce yourself, or if you had a prayer request. And so getting into that church began at 6 o'clock with that circle. So then from there, I would explain to them, like we are in worship right now. We are not a dinner and then worship. It's together. That's what makes dinner church a little more different, unique. So worship began at 6 when we circled, held hands, and we prayed. And the kids would go through the line, and we had people to serve the food, because you know what children will sometimes do. And then 2/3 of it goes in the trash can, right? Because their eyes are bigger than their tummies. And so anyhow, they would get their food, and I would have Christian music playing in the background. We kept everything very low key. So we would have, on a CD player, we had a sound system with a microphone pointed towards the CD player, and we played Christian music in the background because we were in the middle of worship, right? We're eating in worship. And so we just had this music so that the children could start hearing and families could start hearing, and we played the popular stuff because I wanted them to be able to get in their cars, go home, and if they ever heard that song, they would connect to it, right? Because they heard it at dinner church. So worship would continue with the music and eating, and we encourage people to go back as often as you wanted to. And then about 6:20, I would tell people, if you need to go to the restroom, or if you needed to get some more food, please do it, because at 6:30 we would begin the part where we would tell the Jesus story. It's always a Jesus story, right? Because if you only have connection with a person just for that one night, do you want them to know about Abraham, or do you want them to know about Jesus? Right. Both. But if you've only got this amount of time, who do you want them to be connected to?
Jesus.
Exactly, Jesus. And there's so many Jesus stories to tell. You just go through, and I would follow the lectionary and pick out whatever Jesus story was on the lectionary, because that way I didn't have to think about it. And then we would just tell the story. You could just read the story from the Bible or just tell the story. And so we had table hosts. So we would have volunteers who would sit at each table to kind of facilitate some conversation, because that's hard at times. But worship happens at the table too, right? And so we had somebody at each table to kind of help lead the conversation, because I would tell the Jesus story, and then I would say, what in that story intrigued you? What in that story do you have questions about? What did you find unique or unusual? What did you hear in that story? Who are you in this story? I remember one time I told this story about wee little Zacchaeus who climbed up in the sycamore tree. And then Jesus said, come down from there. I'm going to have dinner at your house. So I asked the children, I asked the families that were there, was like, so who's your sycamore tree? Who's helped you to have a better view of who Jesus is? We had one little boy, it was his very first night. He shows up and he had come with some of the other neighborhood kids, and he tells the story. They began to talk at their little tables about who was their sycamore tree. Kids understand that, right? And parents understand. And then after we share, then we bring it all back together, and I was like, does anybody want to share with anybody else? Like, what did you get out of that story? And this little boy who'd been there just his first night came up to me and he said, my daddy is my sycamore tree.
Wow.
He's helped me to see Jesus. You see, Mommy left us for another man. Oh my gosh. My daddy showed me Jesus.
Wow.
Little thing. Now what we found is that the children responded very well anytime they got an opportunity to hold the microphone. And sometimes it was just like, okay, I know you're going somewhere with this. I don't know where you're going with this. But you pastors know, you're just like, okay, I hear you. Surely, Lord, we can make something out of this. And steer it back onto the conversation about Jesus. But children were just so happy to come up and share their thoughts and opinions about Jesus and where they saw Jesus in this story. And so we just would share a different story every time we would meet. Like, where do you see yourself in this story? What are you intrigued or curious about? What you want to share about? So that was that part. And then after we'd had time to share our Jesus story and then have a little bit of table talk time, everything moves fast because we're doing this portion of it in that 30 minutes. So we've circled up, prayed, we've been listening to Jesus music, and we've eaten, and now for the next 30 minutes we're talking about the Jesus story itself, and then table talk occurs. Now sometimes that was just pure old chaos and people were not on target, but guess what? It's okay. It was okay because we were all together and we were getting to know each other, and I kept reminding them worship is occurring at your table. And after the worship portion was, or after the table discussion, we pulled back together, shared among each other about what did you see or hear or learn tonight, and then we would sing a song. We would gather together, sometimes we would sit at our table, sometimes we'd gather in a circle. On my CD player, I would play a song that I knew, and I had song sheets with just the words on it, so we could all, and I wanted it to be a very simple song, but something that we could teach children and family. And we would sing a song together using that CD. We'd sing along with that CD, and then we would pray. And then the next part of worship is, guess what? Clean up. It was not, you all leave, thank you very much, we'll see you next Tuesday. It was, we're going to continue our worship now with cleanup. And we need everybody to help to throw away their trash, to help us to box up the meals. If there was anything left over, we made sure that we had to-go boxes and we gave it to them. We made sure that we had to-go boxes, and we would leave them for the custodians, because they were going to be coming in after us, and so we made sure. And if we had any leftover desserts, we left that for the staff the next morning, and we made sure that they knew that here are these cookies from dinner church. So we're practicing community and being connectional. Now, because we were in an elementary school, we were then able to, the kids could go out onto the playground and play for about 5 or 10 minutes as parents were coming to get their children, or as they were fixing to leave to go home for the day. But, and then we just wrapped up and we left, and repeat it again the next time. So, that is the basics of dinner church, and I tell you, we had, what happened is we had a mobile home park not very far from the East Knox County School. And so we had a van we had 2 vans, and a husband and wife in their 80s each had a van. And their mission was they went to the trailer park, to the mobile home park, and they picked up children. And parents would even drop their kids off there at the school. So, just needless to say, we had a rowdy group of parishioners. But it was beautiful to see these children growing in their faith. And I'll never forget the day, one group of girls came up to me and they said, "So, who's this sister church you are always talking about? You're always telling us about the sister church. Who's New Life, and where is New Life? And can we meet our sisters?" And I said, "Well, they're your brothers and sisters, and you are more than welcome to meet them." See, the purpose isn't to start dinner church to say that we can get them here to our church. You are church. You have a second campus at that school. We had a second campus at that school, and I had to do some educating with the staff or the congregation to let them know, like, it isn't to get them here to get them here. You are here, and they form a congregation. And when this was really at the height before COVID hit, we had 50 in worship on Sunday mornings at New Life, and we had 50 in worship on Tuesday nights at our dinner church. And then what we surprisingly saw was, because the children were very interested in their sister church, those 2 same husband and wife in their vans would drive through and pick the kids up on Sunday mornings and bring them to Sunday. We learned was they were hungry there too. So we would have to offer them a little breakfast thing where they could sit with a juice box and a muffin or Pop-Tart or something like that, so that then when they went into worship, they had their bellies full. What I also learned is that the kids in that community, I won't assume this is true for everybody, but the kids in that community a lot of times had not tasted fruit. Let that sink in for a moment. We had fresh peaches one June, and we had them all sliced up because we realized fruit is eaten better if it's sliced up. Children don't like. And one little girl was like, "I don't even know what that is." So it's a peach. And she was like, "You know what, Pastor Teresa, in my house, we have to buy the food." Now this is a little kid telling me this, so I know this came from Mama. "We have to buy the food that will last the longest. Fruit does not last long enough for us to eat it." Yeah, and she said, "It's too expensive." So I immediately went back to dessert lady, and I said, "Fruit has to be one of the desserts every single time." So the kids were trying apples, they tried pears, well, most had apples, but they had a different fruit cut up and prepared for them so that they could enjoy that experience. So they were teaching us as we were trying to teach them. I'll never forget this time where one little girl, Miss Faith, and she's in middle school now. She had bright blonde hair, and she came out and she brought in all of her little girlfriends that particular Tuesday, and they all wore dresses. They did not in East Knox County. You rarely saw them in dresses. On this particular Tuesday, these little girls wore their dresses, and I thought, I wonder what's that all about? Well, soon enough, when we got ready for me to do my message, the Jesus story, they got up and they started And then when we sang that song, they just started twirling and twirling, all of them twirling and twirling. And then afterwards, they came up to me and they said, "Do you know what we just did?" I said, "No, baby, what'd you do?" "We twirled for Jesus."
Oh.
Slay me! I'm ready to fall on the floor. I'm not gonna get it. They said, we wear pants, we wear shorts. I said, "Yeah, I know." She said, "That's so we can play out on the playground, you know. We want to be able to play in school." But I told the girls that we had to wear our skirts tonight so we could twirl for Jesus. Beautiful stories, being connected with people that you don't know, stepping outside the building in faith. I mean, we didn't know if anybody was ever going to come to dinner church. And we just kept holding space, and we kept reaching out to people in the community. The principal, we were able to send a postcard home in everybody's backpack. You know, you can run that through the school system and get the approval. And up there in Knox County, you put a little line on there that says Knox County Schools does not support or affirm whatever this. There's a little disclaimer thing, and then they let us put it in the backpacks, and that we would do that periodically. And it was just a beautiful time. It was hard work. It was chaos, particularly in the beginning when the children did not know how to behave, and parents would just drop their kids off to give them a free meal so they could run out and do whatever they wanted to do. That was frustrating to us, but we realized, what are we here for? You know, I haven't been at that church in 3 years. Those young people are now in middle school, high school, and a couple of them are even in college now. And I hear from them from time to time. That year and a half before COVID hit, when we started it, we made a lasting relationship, a connection. And it's a beautiful thing to see people we never would have met if we hadn't have left this place to go to where they are. So that's my dinner church experience. If you have any questions.
So how did you get into the school system? So was it difficult?
We were already in contact, in relationship with the school, volunteering for certain things. Or if they called and said, "Hey, it's Teacher Appreciation Week, can you come and feed the teachers?" So we had a connection with the principal and the teachers already. We didn't just show up and knock on the door and say, "Hey, can we be the church that's in here?" So we met with the we'd known the principal. I'd been there, I'm not being there for 9 years at that church, but I'd been there 4 or 5, 6, something like 6 years before. So we were already in connection with them. And so, then when we realized we could be that church in the elementary schools, when I went to the principal and said, "What can we do for you?" And she said, "Feed the kids." Yeah.
How did you do with having 40 kids, giving them to the right parents? Do a postcard to the parent to pick up a kid? You don't wanna,
Just go anywhere, go home with anybody.
Right.
Well, when we were on the playground, it was a fenced in. And so the parents would pull up and we would say, "Who's your kid?" And of course you gotta call them in off the playground. And so we had somebody there to make the exchange. It didn't take too long to kind of know who the parent was. And of course then we had the two sweet ladies, husband and wife, that drove the vans, and they loaded kids up and they knew where to take them to their homes. When it was cold outside or dark when we did dinner church, we stayed in the cafeteria or the gym, and there again, it was enclosed, and we waited till a parent came and made sure that we made that exchange at that time.
Okay, cause that would be a concern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, another concern that occurred to me, you mentioned picking up children from the mobile home
Yes,
park. Did they have to get a permission slip?
we did.
Okay.
We did, we
I
had
figured
permission.
that was the case, but.
We did, we had a permission slip that they could come with us. Yes, and, oftentimes, someone would text ahead of time, you know, am I picking up your kid today? So we were trying to find, you know, that's another way to start ministry with somebody, right? Is I'm texting you every week, is Faith gonna get to come to dinner church tonight? Okay, well, we will see her at the designated location where we were picking up the kids. Great question. Anybody else? After the Change for Children grant, we wrote another Change for Children grant, we got more money. So, so that's what was funding this, so that it wasn't coming out of our pocket, and that helped us.
So it was coming from who?
Change for Children, it's a Holston Conference grant thing. Yeah. So people would go and buy the food, make the food, and turn in their receipts to the office, and then they would be reimbursed. Or if they called the office, they could say, you know, I need to, you know, we would work something out with that. Yes, Leslie?
Did you say you spent a small amount to rent the space in the
Yes.
school? So would you say that and the food were the main expenses?
Yeah, that was the, I mean, we, at the table, we always had a children's bulletin, so when kids came in, there was crayons and a children's bulletin. I mean, we weren't creative, we pulled the children's bulletins that we would put in a Sunday morning thing, right? And if I knew, since we followed the lectionary, everybody knew what was gonna be preaching on that Tuesday, or that Jesus story. There's not preaching, it's telling the Jesus story. And, they would just pull those, so we had just maybe a little bit of money invested in the paper that would be there and the crayons, yeah. And we brought in special guests, like, Gibbs High School had they had a madrigal group, and so at Christmas time, that was our dinner church experience, so the kids could, my goodness, they would just sit on the floor and look at these high school kids, you know, looking up to them, knowing one day that was gonna get to be them. So we were trying to pull in other people to be connectional into the community with them. And of course, every time camp came around, then that was the week that we had the camp staff come in and sing and lead us in worship that night.
What was the ratio of adults to children typically?
Well, I tell you what, that's a great question, because in the beginning, we had more adults and few children. And then as it began to grow, there was some days when it was 50-50. And then at the very end, sometimes we had more children in worship than we did adults. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is trying to encourage the whole family to be there, but you just can't make that a requirement. You would rather have children than nobody from that family, but yeah. So, I mean, it was loud, it was wild. And, but you know, you just work through whatever, you know, chaos you need. And then, but there was worship all in the middle of it. And that's what I kept assuring people, is that there's worship. From the moment you walk in, we consider that to be church. So it's not, like I said before, dinner and then worship. It all begins right at 6 o'clock.
Great.
Any other questions?
Did you say did you go for like an hour? From
Yes.
6 to 7?
Yes, we went from 6 to 7, and then at 7, we broke off to do a cleaning, or I might a little bit ahead of time, and that was where we invited other people. Oh, that's another, I'm glad you asked that question, because it's not, here are the servants, and here are the people we are to serve. It starts out that way, but worship is just as much about throwing trash away, right? So we're not there, in the beginning you are there serving, but what you want to do is you want to invite the children and the parents, the adult. Hey, can you serve the drinks tonight? Hey, will you serve the food out, the lasagna tonight? Hey, will you help us with clean? Everybody right from day one was invited to help with cleanup. Hey, will you take the Clorox wipes and wipe down the tabletops of where we have just eaten? So it's trying to get other people involved in that sin, and people were eager to do that. They wanted to help. Now, I know some dinner churches, they put out a donation box and they collect donations, but we knew in East Knox County, with the poverty and who was coming to our church, that we felt like with the grant money, we didn't wanna do that at this time. Yeah, great question.
Your story about the fruit, rung a bell with me. My parents were children of the Depression.
Yeah.
They lived out in the country and they had enough to eat, but they didn't have any extra money. And so after I came along in the 40s, Dad would always bring a big old box of oranges. That was one of his things for Christmas.
Right.
And you know, when I was looking at him, why is he doing that, you know? Well, when he was a kid, they didn't have fruit at all, so a big box of oranges was a prize.
It's a prize.
And so that would be the way it is for those kids.